Okay, so lots of...
Just joining, please do have a go and use Slido on your phones. Really easy to log in, and so you can join in this interactive part of our session tonight.
Fantastic. So we have quite a big group of kids between 5 and 10, and also quite a few between 11 and 16, and then a couple of under 5s and a few 16 pluses. That's great. Thank you very much. That's great. So I guess this question, you've already started to fill it in, so that's great. It's just giving us a sense of kind of what your biggest concern is for your children at the moment. So it looks like lots of you have concerns around mental health, lots of concern, some concern around education, not so much, friendships and relationships. Yeah. Okay, great. So definitely all of you can see, it sounds like for most of you that mental health is kind of the biggest thing that you're worried about at the moment. Okay, thank you for that. I guess tonight what we're hoping to cover is just to think a little bit about making sense of what we're kind of feeling at the moment, thinking about what the kind of most significant challenges are posed by the pandemic. Most importantly, the kinds of things that we can do to kind of manage some of these challenges. And then we're also just going to touch on at the end just some of the benefits, I suppose, for our young people of going through a time of real uncertainty, and how that can kind of contribute to their resilience, in addition to all the difficulties that kind of come with it. Okay, so for this Slido, I'd just like you just to have a think about how you are feeling for your young person at this time. Okay, so lots of people, a couple of people feeling worried, confused for them. Yeah, feeling sad and anxious, worried about their future, worried that my efforts aren't good enough, anxious, concerned. Just want to provide an environment where they feel safe. Yeah, and safety, you know, I think lots of our young people are really struggling with feeling safe at the moment. Long-term impacts of not being able to form friendships. Yeah, I think people are quite concerned, you know, because it's not something they're getting to practice every day, is it? And for all of us, I think when we're not able to kind of practice skills, they often kind of deplete a little bit. Worried about their lack of independence. Yeah. And, you know, I think that's across the age range, but I think it's particularly for kind of younger children who are just beginning to kind of start doing things independently and developing a bit of autonomy. And I think they also can start losing those skills a little bit. People feeling guilty. Yeah, I think there's lots of guilt around, particularly for people who are trying to juggle kind of working from home and also minding their children. Exhausted and emotional. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing all of those things. You know, and you know, I think what you're sharing actually really resonates with what we know from the research. So we know that people are across the board are reporting that their well-being has been negatively impacted. And we also know that so a survey was done in 2017 and it was repeated in July of last year. And actually there's been an increase from 10.8 to 16% in mental health difficulties between 5 to 16-year-olds. So, you know, it definitely, the research is kind of bearing out some of the worries and concerns that all of you are having. And just, it would be really nice if we could also just try and capture how you're feeling as a parent at this time.
It's Mr. Bredmore from Lowestoft.
Okay, knackered. Oh yeah, I can really resonate with that. Feeling like a failure, overwhelmed, sometimes okay, yeah. Swamped, emotional, frustrated, wanting to be positive, yeah. Like an octopus, yeah. And that's what it feels a bit like. And, you know, I think this idea of being able to kind of work from home and parent from home is just, I think it's setting all of us up with really overwhelming expectations. It's not really possible to kind of do both of those jobs really well. And that's something we're going to touch on a little bit later in the presentation. Panicking, trying to be positive. Yeah, and I think for sure all of us are trying to do that a lot, and it's exhausting. Guilty and emotional, really worried if I'm doing a good enough job, having to hide my own worries, surviving. And you know what's really interesting, I suppose, about this process is, you know, everyone who is on this call, you know, I can definitely resonate with a lot of the things that you're saying as a mom. And, you know, I think it's just recognizing, I suppose, that everyone is struggling at the moment. Lots of people are feeling overwhelmed and they're really struggling. So thank you again very much for sharing all of that. You know, I guess what's bandied around a lot at the moment is this idea that, you know, it's okay not to feel okay. And, you know, ultimately, I guess we are in the middle of a global pandemic. We all have been exposed to ongoing stress and uncertainty for a very, very long time. And actually what happens to our minds and our bodies when we're exposed to all of this uncertainty over a long period of time is it depletes us. So it is absolutely normal for us and our young people to be struggling at the moment. And, you know, even though all of, you know, and some of you put into the chat, like we just try and hide our own worries, we try and put on a brave face. And, you know, I think all of us are probably able to recognize the massive benefits of kind of feeling positive, like positive emotions like joy and gratitude. But, you know, sometimes it feels like there's an awful lot of pressure to be happy and to kind of push away those more negative emotions like sadness and anger. But you know what we know from the research is that we actually need all of our emotions. Not just those emotions that kind of make us feel good, but those ones that don't feel so great, like anxiety and sadness. And, you know, essentially what our emotions do is they draw our attention to the important things that are happening in our lives. So, you know, when we feel anxious in response to something that's threatening, like the pandemic, you know, this is actually the thing that kind of motivates us to wash our hands, to socially distance. And it's just important to recognize that, you know, the emotions that our young people are experiencing, that they're experiencing in response to the pandemic, they're normal. And, you know, sometimes it's just more helpful to kind of let them experience the emotions, knowing that that's kind of how they feel for now. And it, you know, those two words for now are just a really helpful reminder that our emotions, they arrive, they stay for a while, and then they eventually kind of move off again. And sometimes as parents, when we see our young people kind of presenting with a particular emotion, we feel a real urge to kind of resolve it. But actually they're probably experiencing that emotion for a really good reason. And it's okay. It's okay to kind of let them sit with that emotion for a little while. And, you know, I guess the other thing that we just need to hold in mind about emotion is just how contagious they are. So, you know, that if you have a child who's really anxious about something, you can often end up kind of feeling really anxious yourself. But I suppose it also kind of goes the other way. And I think as adults, we're normally kind of responsible for setting the emotional tone in our family. And, you know, right now, all of us are experiencing in one day, most of us are experiencing a whole plethora of emotions. And that's absolutely fine. But I guess it is just being mindful of if you're beginning to feel completely overwhelmed by those emotions, because those emotions are going to impact on the emotions of everybody else in your household. And this is something that Linda is going to touch on a little bit later, because what we know is that we really need to prioritize our own self-care if we want to be in a position to manage those very normal emotions that all of us are experiencing at the moment. So I just wonder, what have been the main challenges with our young people during this lockdown? What are the main challenges that you've experienced?
Presentation. If everybody doesn't mind, use the chat function on, if you use the chat function on Zoom to put your comments. So look, here we've got people now, they're doing it in the chat function. So lack of social interaction with their peers, maintaining a routine, keeping them engaged, retaining positivity, staying up until the early hours on social media. Can you see the chat now, Tamara? Staying positive and helping the children understand what's going on without oversharing with them. Mood swings are unpredictable, explaining why we're in lockdown again and again, child not sleeping, motivating my son to get through his schoolwork. Can you see the chat, Tamara?
Any independence, managing changing routines, not sleeping until late because they're on screens all day for school, missing out on seeing friends, another big adjustment, trying to keep them off social media during school time, but wanting them to stay. Really, really tricky. Missing family, missing social interaction, nothing to look forward to. And, you know, I think our young people are just, I think one of the biggest losses of this pandemic is all of the losses for our young people. I mean, I think if you take teenagers, for example, you know, they are biologically programmed to be separating from their parents. They're in a stage of their development where their peer relationships are becoming so much more important. And actually, they are, the situation is almost reversed. They're kind of at home and they're spending way more time with their family. And that is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult for them not to be able to kind of spend time with their peers. And it's, you know, it's also difficult because the main medium they have for being in touch with their peers is all of this kind of social media stuff, which is brilliant. And, you know, we all should feel incredibly grateful that they're able to stay connected in that way. But I guess it's still missing that kind of face-to-face interaction. And I know there's lots of parents kind of worried about what is happening with what will happen with their social skills, you know, both for younger children and for older children, because when we're not using skills really regularly, they do tend to kind of atrophy a little bit. So though, you know, I think those are all really, you know, I think there's lots of people kind of experiencing those worries and those concerns. And, you know, I think for younger children, lots of parents are kind of reporting that they're finding their children being a lot more clingy. And that's hard, isn't it? Because they've kind of set out on this journey of developing more independence, becoming a little bit more courageous, and you see those skills developing, and it's really hard to kind of see that decreasing because they're at home. I guess one thing to kind of hold in mind with some of this is, you know, a lot of these concerns were around during the last lockdown when kids were also off school for kind of a massive period of time. And for the majority of children, once they got back and once they got over the initial hurdle of getting back into school, what we saw in most children is a return of those skills. So I guess it's quite important to kind of hold that in mind. And I know lots of people with teenagers in particular are finding it difficult to kind of manage sleep. And, you know, we know that sleep patterns change anyway in adolescence. The hormone melatonin that kind of tells our brain that it's time to be sleepy gets released a lot later in teenagers. But I also think that screen time is probably making that quite tricky. So thank you all very much for kind of sharing some of those challenges. And I'm very sorry for kind of the technical difficulties that we had. I guess what I just want to think about next is just a kind of a helpful way for us to understand some of these challenges, maybe in a slightly different way. than you might have tried to understand them before. So if you just kind of use your imagination with me a little bit, because there is this incredible American psychiatrist called Dan Siegel, and he developed this really accessible, simplified way to kind of think about our brains and what's happening in our brain. And I think, and I hope, by you guys having a bit of a better understanding of this, it will make a little bit more sense of some of those challenges that you're experiencing, both with younger kids and with older kids. So if you just imagine your brain kind of as a house, and within that house, you have the upstairs part of your brain. So that's the prefrontal cortex, and it kind of sits just behind your forehead. So this is the part of our brain that is our control tower. So this is the part of our brain that's responsible for kind of planning, organizing, making good decisions, being able to be flexible. And then you have the downstairs part of our brain, which is the amygdala. And, you know, essentially this is kind of the emotion center. And the main responsibility of the downstairs part of our brain is kind of keeping us safe from danger. So when we are feeling calm and we're feeling relaxed, the upstairs and the downstairs part of our brain, they work really well together. So even when you experience a lot of emotion, you're still able to make a good decision because your brain is integrated and there's lots of lovely communication going on. Now, what's really significant to hold in mind is that downstairs part of your brain, so the part where kind of all of your emotions live, and that fight or flight response, you're born with that part fully developed. So, but the upstairs part of the brain, so the part of your brain that you need to make good decisions, is not fully developed until your young person is in their mid-20s. And this is a really significant piece of information, because essentially what it means is that our young people's access to that upstairs thinking part of their brain is often very difficult, because what happens, if you look at the second picture on this diagram, what happens is that when they get overwhelmed by these big emotions, what happens is the upstairs part literally flips off. And I'm sure all of you have had experiences with your children of any age where they have been having a massive meltdown about something, and you're trying to kind of say calm down, and you're trying to kind of explain to them why, you know, give them some help, think about, well, is there another way to think about this, or give them an explanation for why it's happening. And it often feels like they're not even listening. But and the reality of it is they're not really able to listen and understand what you're saying until the upstairs part of their brain comes back online. And at the moment, for our young people, because of the level of uncertainty, and for our teenagers with all of their development that they should be doing and how all of that is blocked, we have already said how normal and natural these emotions are. But because they're experiencing all of these emotions, the chances are that the lid is going to be flipping off more often. So if we just move to the next slide. So essentially what this slide is about is thinking about what can we do about this? Because all of our young people are going to be flipping their lid a little bit more right now because of the roller coaster of emotions. Now, I've written at the top of that slide, just a warning, this is really hard, because ultimately the answer lies in not having answers and not being able to resolve everything for them, because you're just not going to be able to. The answer really lies in connection. So when your adolescent or your little person has flipped their lid, the most helpful and probably the hardest thing that you can do in that moment is to try and keep your own upstairs brain from flipping off. So it's essentially, it's about taking a really deep breath and trying to let it wash over you. And this big emotion that they're experiencing will pass, but it will pass much more quickly if you're able to just hold steady and just wait for their hyperarousal to reduce and for their upstairs brain to come back online. Now, in the moment, this is really hard to do. I live and breathe this stuff in my job, and I still don't manage to do this with my own kids. I manage it sometimes, and sometimes I don't. It is hard, but it is a really helpful piece of information just to hold in your mind. So these are just a couple of steps that you can take in trying to do this. So the first step is fairly self-explanatory. It's just kind of noticing what your young person is doing. And I'm sure all of you know your young people well enough to kind of know the signs, or, you know, you just, sometimes they just walk into a room and you just get a feeling, don't you, that things aren't really okay. So first of all, it's just noticing those things. The second thing is probably the most important part, and that is just checking in with yourself. You know, it's super hard, if not impossible, to help regulate your young person if you are feeling dysregulated yourself. So if, and you'll know your own signs, like for me, for sure, my voice gets a lot louder. I can just feel tension in my body. And you know what? It's okay. In that moment, it is okay just to leave the situation, breathe for 5 minutes, breathe for 2 minutes, if that's all you have, just to try and kind of bring down your own hyperarousal and then go back into your young person. And then I guess the next two things that are on this list, just being curious. So I guess what being curious means is just, instead of jumping to a conclusion, which is often what we do, is just giving the child a chance to talk about what they might be feeling. And it probably looks something a little bit like this, like, you know, I'm a little bit confused. Usually you love doing maths online, but today you don't want to take part. And I'm just wondering what's different about today. And what this does is it just creates a moment of connection. And what the young person will experience in this moment is an adult, one of their parents or caregivers, really trying to understand them. Now, sometimes you'll get it wrong and you'll make a mistake, and you know, that's okay. You know, if that happens, you just kind of hold your hand up and say, hey, I got it wrong. You know, thanks for helping me to understand what you're really feeling. And then the second part of that is just trying to remain empathic. So empathy is really a superpower, because what empathy promotes is connection. Now, this doesn't mean that your young person doesn't go on and do the class online. It is not about not having boundaries. Boundaries are really important. They kind of make children feel really safe. But if you take the time to do that connecting by being curious and being empathic, it will be so much easier to put the boundary into place, because what you will have done is you will have brought the upstairs part of their brain back online. And the last thing I just have on this slide is just repair. You know, at this time, and I know loads of you kind of noted this in the challenges, is, you know, relationships are hard at the moment. Ruptures in relationships are really normal. And I think ruptures in relationships are just higher at the moment because of the circumstances we're all in. I guess what's really important to remember is just the huge importance of repair. Going back and saying, you know, I'm sorry that I yelled. That wasn't the way I wanted to handle the situation. And, you know, if you're able to do this, and it's really hard, but if you're able to do it, you're teaching your young person, firstly, that ruptures are normal and that ruptures in relationships can be repaired. But the other thing you're doing, which is really important, is you are deepening your relationship with your child. So even if your young person kind of turns around and is like, go away, or grunts something at you that you can't even understand what it is, you know, they are still left with that feeling that you care about them and that you are trying your best to kind of support them, and that sometimes you get it wrong. And that is what is going to kind of deepen your relationship with them. Okay, so I hope all of that makes sense and it's helpful. I'm going to pass over to Linda Brindle now, who's going to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. Just a warning, I seem to be having some problems with my connection, so we'll see how we go with this. But let's move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So you've talked already about the many challenges of lockdown, and you've shared on chat, thank you, really helpfully to show everyone the understanding of the different experiences that you're all having at the moment. But now let's move on to the next slide. And having thought about some of the challenges, Tamara moves us on to the next slide. I'd like us to just have a think about and go to Slido to think about what's actually been working well to manage some of these challenges. So what are the little things that you're doing that seem to be helping in some circumstances or on some occasions, or things that are making life feel a bit more okay because you've worked out something that seems to fit okay? So this seems to be working on Slido. This has come up. Well, I don't know, because I don't know whether, oh, great, it is. Lovely, we're back to Slido. It's a much better forum when we can use it. So flexibility. Sometimes giving schoolwork a rest, yeah. Having lunch times together. Saying kind words, it's okay, reassuring. Having a daily routine, great. Getting out in the fresh air together. Praise, the power of praise can never be underestimated. Treats I saw there, there's so many coming through now. Thanks very much for all your ideas. Keep sending them through. Routine and planning. Family time, lots of cuddles and saying I'm proud of them. Yeah, when one of us is struggling, if somebody else notices and recognizes and values what we're doing and that we're trying, it's really makes such a difference, doesn't it? Having a reward chart, meals together as a family, keeping school in school time. Having a laugh when things don't go as planned. Brilliant one. Really so important, isn't it? And not taking everything too seriously. Incentives, pizza night, lovely. Patience, wow, well done. Yeah, sometimes it's easier than others, isn't it? Allowing space, yeah, when we're all cramped in together for so much time compared to normal. Focusing on core subjects, so actually choosing what seems the priority for your young person. Trying to take individual time for everyone. And wow, isn't that a challenge to do at the moment, but just have opportunities for connection one-to-one. Working as a team, yeah, so trying to get everyone to invest in things that can work well for all of you and bring a closer sense of connection at this time. Okay, and you also, yeah, deciding screen time isn't the worst thing they can be doing at the moment. Okay, yeah, absolutely. They've really got a limited choice of options at the moment, our young people, and working out what things are actually okay is that even if they feel different in normal times, may feel okay now. Letting them sleep, okay, so yeah, giving them more time to sort of rest and maybe understanding that they might need those things. Wow, thanks ever so much. Those are amazing. Lots of different ideas that you've been trying to work out, to overcome some of the present challenges that you're facing, and trying to reduce pressure. And wow, that's a key one, isn't it? And I think we as parents can sometimes hold that pressure when we're trying to manage the homeschooling and the working and the number of other things that might well be on our plate as well. Yeah. and including other family members in school subjects. Great. So actually trying to share the load a bit, perhaps. That sounds a great idea. Thanks very much for sharing all of those things. Let's just move along now. Okay, so I guess what I want to do now is just a reminder of some of the key things that we know that will help for all of our young people. And I think that some of the ideas that you've already shared will absolutely fit into this next section of what we're talking about. But what we know is how important it is just to get the basics right. Sleep's a challenge for many young people at the moment, with all the changes in routine, loss of structure. Often young people may be on social media more than normal, and there might be all sorts of reasons for disruptive sleep patterns that we wouldn't normally see. And there's less motivation for our young people to get up in the morning, perhaps, and less reward in terms of opportunities to do the things that they want to do and enjoy. And I guess the first thing is to remember to be kind to ourselves. And as some people shared in the last Slido, that actually just to sort of accept these are different times, and we can only do the best that we can. But what we know is that what things can help with a sleep routine is building up a kind of regular routine as much as possible, and trying to encourage our young people to get up at the same time every day, even if it's a couple of hours later than normal, or even maybe later than that for some of the adolescents. But encouraging the same time every day will be helpful for the body clock, and encouraging one long sleep rather than lots of short naps in the day also we know is more helpful for us to actually get the most benefit from our sleep. Remembering to have time to wind down before bed. So what we know is that being highly emotionally aroused is not conducive to sleep. So if a young person is hearing news or discussion of COVID, then maybe that isn't a great time to be thinking about doing that in an hour before sleep. Equally, gaming, where our youngsters can get really drawn in and excited with what they're doing, again, isn't helpful. Knowing that screens and the light from screens actually impact on the body clock and is encouraging the body to be more alert rather than settle down is a reason why screen time in the hour before bed isn't a good idea, and instead just thinking about creating a more soothing, settling time in that hour with a bit of a routine. With the younger children, it might be bath time and milky drink and story time, and with older young people they might want a different routine, but trying to avoid the screen time and have opportunities to do something relaxing and settling, whether they're reading a book, listening to chilled music, doing some colouring, or doing some drawing, but something that's a little bit more chilled. And if you want more ideas on sleep, there's lots of thoughts on that. We've done a sleep podcast that we'll be sending you links to. And thinking about exercise next. And we know how important exercise is for sleep, to expend the energy that we've got in the day so that we're actually ready to rest at night. But exercise is really also important for mood and for our mental alertness. So it can reduce our stress and anxiety. People talk about going out for a run or doing lots of star jumps. It can be a really helpful way of expending some of these stress hormones with the adrenaline shooting around our body when we're feeling stressed and anxious. But also, we know that exercise and activity is really important, releasing dopamine, which makes us feel good, and it can also improve our confidence and self-esteem, engaging in exercise. But one of you said how hard it is to get your kids to exercise, and I guess it's about thinking creatively. I mean, people with dogs, I think there's lots of dog walking going on at the moment, but remembering for other kids that perhaps aren't so keen on that, so there's the kitchen disco, maybe trying to do Zumba with your child. I did see again somebody saying earlier that they were trying to do exercise classes with their child, whether it's Joe Wicks or something a bit different, or maybe star jumps, or doing jogging on the spot, or having a little sort of routine that you all do as a family as a way to try and encourage that. I appreciate it's tricky, and I guess it's trying to think creatively and maybe connecting projects or family tasks which involve some activity, or setting up a treasure hunt that involves some speed, some things like that. Some people might be able to manage sometimes, but I do recognise it's really tricky trying to work out what's going to motivate our youngster to do exercise if they just don't feel up to it. Often once we exercise, we actually have more energy, but when we don't feel like it, we can't imagine that. And lastly on this slide, eating regularly, so that we know that actually having regular and healthy meal times is really important for our gut and our immune system and our own overall health. It impacts the amount of sugar that we have on our energy levels and on our mood. In times of distress, it's really easy to either engage in sort of overeating for comfort and ease and getting takeaways and things, and that's all okay. Sometimes some people end up actually reducing what they eat to try and have a sense of control, and I guess we need to sort of monitor those things if we see changes in our children, but you know, generally, unless there are significant changes in weight and presentation, they're not things to be overly concerned about. But what may be really important is to just notice with our young person that they're doing things differently, and if we can try and encourage alternative activities and things that can either create that sense of control or that sense of comfort, rather than turning to food and the relationship with food, that can be a more helpful way of managing that separation between the fact that we need a good range of healthy food to keep us mentally as well as physically healthy. So sometimes, you know, remembering that family meal times can be really positive experience if you can encourage a time of sharing and conversation, and also respect of listening to each other and hearing about each other's day. That can be a really nice time for connection. And I guess it's working out if that works for your family to do daily, or if it's something new, you might just want to try it doing once a week first of all, and then increasing it to sort of decrease that sort of novelty as people get to experience sitting around the table and talking and sharing together. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so obviously this is a time when we all can be struggling a bit, and our youngsters may be especially struggling with that sort of loss of meaning and a sense of purpose. And lack of structure and routine can impact on sleep and eating. Work and school would usually offer set times for this, and it can be much more hard to do that at home. And we know that lack of structure can also reduce motivation to do things. It's difficult to get up in the morning. It's difficult to push yourself when you haven't got to be in school or do things at particular times. And lack of structure and routine as well can generate anxiety for some people. And so it can mean that, you know, a youngster doesn't really know what to expect in the day, or the days can just seem endless when there aren't set things in place. And without structure, sometimes tasks that we put off doing can then also become overwhelming. So actually, lack of structure and routine can impact on our mood and also impact on anxiety. And so it's really worth thinking about how you can implement some structure and routine. And I know some people have said they've already been doing that. And if you're not, it really can have a powerful effect on our well-being. So structure and predictability can give us a sense of certainty and a sense of control. And one of the ways you might do that is map out your week for you and each member of your family. And providing a visual representation is great for younger and people, but also for adolescents as well. And actually for me as an adult, I'm a very visual person, and I find that really helpful. And if you just break up your day into morning, afternoon and evening, and slot in your set times for meals and sleep time at night, then you've already got a bit of a structure there to work on. And then it's really looking at what else you should be adding into your day, or what are your youngsters already doing? And are they actually doing things that are creating opportunities to have fun and opportunities to feel a sense of achievement, as well as the tasks and the school work and other things that have to be done within the day? And I guess what we know is that it's really helpful to think about every day, trying to have a good balance of things. So whether it's schoolwork or other opportunities for learning or other opportunities for a sense of achievement, cooking the evening meal, for example, or getting round to tidy the bedroom. Those are things that are important for our youngsters to learn and also give a sense of achievement in itself, even if you don't like doing the task in hand. So achievement and fun, and with that connection as well. So we know how important, as Tamara was talking about, connection is for all of us as humans. That sort of connection to others is quite key for our well-being. And so encouraging our youngsters to have opportunities to slot in and book in times for connection, and maybe, you know, using different sorts of medium, including perhaps phone calls where you're actually speaking directly to, you know, maybe a family member, as well as whichever way your youngsters choose to communicate with their friends. These can all be really key. So I've talked about mapping out the week with a structure and maybe a little bit of a table, and then you can spot where there's too much time spent just scrolling listlessly on phones, or just feeling bored and watching whatever's on TV. And it gives you a chance to, instead of that, encourage a young person to choose an active thing that they want to watch on TV and then specifically do that, and maybe limit the time just doing scrolling, because often that isn't actually an activity that is much fun for people. And then secondly, the other sort of way that you could look at this is just this 5 ways to well-being. So this has been something that's been around very much in this this COVID period, and I guess to think about it a bit like having, it's good to have your 5 fruit and veg every day. It's also good to think about these 5 things in terms of connecting for your well-being every day. So again, they're things we've already talked about: connection, I've said how important that is. Being active, yeah, exercise we know is good for the mind as well as the body. Keep learning, so learning all sorts of things, not just about work. Learning's about learning life skills, learning things in life. And then being kind to yourself and to others, to give. We know how valuable it can be to be giving to others, how good that can actually make us feel. Actually being kind to ourselves, and rather than having that self-critical sort of voice that can come into our head, not getting caught up with that, but speaking to ourselves in our head, so to speak, like we would speak to others and our friends. Being kind to ourselves will actually enable us to do things. And when we get caught up with listening to that self-critical voice, that's actually quite disenabling and really so unhelpful for our well-being. And the last thing on this slide is taking notice. And here this is talking about encouraging us to notice the things that are really important for us. So not just noticing the things that are around, but noticing our thoughts all the time, but actually noticing what's happening in the present, in the here and now. And so rather than getting caught up in worried thoughts and feelings, what's happened in the past and in the future, we can train our brain to develop the skill to notice more what's happening in the present moment, and therefore live in the present moment rather than be always caught up in our thoughts. And this is an amazing skill that's been recognized as so valuable for our well-being. And that's what mindfulness in its true sense is really all about. And at the end of this presentation, there'll be some details around how you can engage in mindful activities if this is something you think might be helpful for you. Next slide, please. And so we're coming towards the end of our talk, but there's some really important bits left still to cover. This first slide is around work-life rhythm. So rather than thinking about a balance at this time, because things may not feel balanced, just thinking about the importance for you each in your family groupings to work out what rhythm works for you. And here expectations is really key. So this is perhaps the time where, if you haven't already, that you should be thinking about, how do I adjust my expectations so they are realistic for myself and for others and for my children, and support my children to adjust their expectations, recognizing that these are really unusual times and we need to be more flexible. And if we reduce our expectations, then we're actually creating more opportunities for us to feel successful. So I guess an example, if I think back to when I had my first child and she was a baby, I had all sorts of expectations of what I was going to achieve in the day. And I suddenly realized that actually I was feeling really frustrated because I wasn't managing any of those things, because my key role was just to be there to look after my new baby. And it took me, you know, a few weeks to really recognize that my expectations were unrealistic of myself. And once I'd adjusted them, I actually felt in a much better place. And any extra thing I managed to do was a real opportunity for sort of a personal success for me, that I managed something extra in the day. And I guess this is really key. So for all of us, we'll be managing different things. There's no point comparing our family to others. Everyone's different and all circumstances are different. But being able to see what you need for your family to manage well and to support your family's well-being is really important to think about. What are the key things for you in your day-to-day living? So remember, reach out to the school if you're struggling to juggle everything and you're finding the online learning is just too much and creating too much challenge in the household. Let the school know and give them a chance to actually adjust their expectations of you. Remember, each day is a new day and come to it afresh. It's really hard for us to look ahead clearly at the moment. So just taking a day at a time and seeing what we can manage each day is a really helpful approach today, and it also to take. And it also enables us to perhaps just leave behind anything from the day before and start the day afresh. That's really helpful for our young people to know that whatever's gone before, whatever mistakes any of us have made, whether we're adults or children, you know, we can start a new day afresh and see what it will bring. And remember that in this time where most of the kids aren't in school, that this is an opportunity for them to learn all sorts of different things and life skills, learn around cooking, problem solving, organising and planning. So just think about the opportunities for your young person to develop into the sort of person you want them to be as an adult. You know, I guess we all want our children to be happy and able to sort of look after themselves and have friends around them. And, you know, that's so much more broad than sometimes the school curriculum is. So, you know, see this as an opportunity to encourage and teach your child other key skills or give them opportunities to learn. Gratitude and appreciation. I guess just remembering that we can get caught up in our minds on lots of challenges, all the difficulties, or all the problems, and it's very natural for our minds to get caught up with those difficulties. But actually, it can be really helpful for us to notice the positive things and actually rebalance our mind. And people have found that spotting three things that have worked okay in a day, and noting those every day. It can sometimes feel a bit hard at first, but they can really start to develop, to retrain their brain to spot those bits about what's actually going okay. Once we do that, that really impacts on our impression of our experience of life day by day. And the last point on here is really important, isn't it? Having fun. We know that amongst all the challenges that we're facing, just grab and grasp any opportunities for having some fun. And again, I noticed some of those comments on the slides you shared about your experiences earlier. Let's just move on then. And the last slide linked to this is just to remind ourselves that actually this is a really challenging time, but we can do hard things. The pandemic, it provides us with an opportunity for ourselves and our young people to actually become more psychologically flexible. That means are more adaptable and able to manage in different situations. So it's a real opportunity to learn to sort of strengthen those skills around resilience, that we can grow and develop more as people. And so part of that might mean that sometimes we want to do everything for our young people and we might be feeling pulled in all directions, but actually it's okay not always to rush to help their practical needs all the time. And sometimes by not doing that, we're creating opportunities for our young people to learn different ways to do things, different people to ask, different ways to solve a problem that they would naturally always go to their carer to do first. And so remember, you can't be all things to all people, but actually there will be opportunities within this really difficult time of the pandemic that we can all learn and learn different ways to do things and become more flexible, which is an amazing life skill to use. And I guess the last point on this slide is that about repairing. And just as Tamara talked about earlier, we can remember that we won't always get things right as parents. Our kids don't always get things right. You know, none of us manage things just the way we would like to all the time. But remembering that we can repair and mend ruptured relationships is so important. And, you know, it's up to us often as a parent to take that lead as the adult to actually start that conversation and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound like this, or I'm sorry that you misunderstood me. What I meant was this. And so actually you can smooth through those ruptures and repair. And as Tamara said earlier, actually strengthen your relationship as a result. This slide is so important because it's a reminder that emotions are contagious. And if we're struggling emotionally at a particular point, it's impossible for us to be able to adequately help our young person support themselves and manage their own emotions. So as Tamara said earlier, you know, you need to remember to give yourself time and space and opportunity to fill up your own resource bucket first, so that you are in a place to be able to support your youngster best. And when you're feeling very unresourced and there is something going on that you need to respond to, try and take a couple of minutes just to take some breaths, as Tamara said, and just give yourself to calm a moment, or if you can, have a little conversation with someone if that's helpful, just to sort of manage to reduce your own overwhelming feelings so that you're in a better place to support your young person to manage those. So I guess, you know, one key thing we'd say is look for opportunities, take those 10 minutes, have that long bath that you always wanted to have, you know, take an extra 5 minutes if you can, have some downtime for you, opportunities for you to connect. And we know, especially for parents who are by themselves parenting their children, it can be really tough. And even more so for you, you know, find those opportunities, if you're able to connect with others and have some regular sort of downtime, relaxing with others, even if it's over watching a film together in different places, but making moments so that you can fill up your own resource bucket and feel in a better place to manage the day ahead. And next slide, please, Tamara. And so I guess just pulling together the last few slides, the take-home messages for this is about really, for you, remembering that this is really hard. And I think we're hearing from everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, how hard this is. And things are still uncertain at the moment. But don't underestimate some of the key basic things you can do, getting those basics right around sleep, exercise and eating, prioritizing connection, both for you and your young people, practicing kindness wherever it's possible. And Tamara found this, the idea of JOMO rather than FOMO. So rather than fear of missing out, actually noticing the things that you actually can feel a bit joyful that you're not doing, that you might normally be doing. And I guess it's remembering as well that this too will pass. This is a stage, isn't it? And we don't know how things are panning out, but we do know that this experience that we're having at the moment will pass, and it's really important to hold on to that. Just have a read of this slide. Okay. Okay, that's a challenge for us all. So we've got some resources that we have just at the end of this, which we want to share with you, but there's just a couple of more things on Slido that we would like to ask. So what are the 2 things that you're going to take away from this session today? This is really helpful if you're able to put that on Slido. I'm sorry that we've run over a little bit. This is really helpful for us, but also really good as a reminder for you about what's been important for you from the session tonight. Yeah, making sure you're okay. Structure, work-life rhythm. Chilling a bit more, taking off the pressure. Breathing. Yeah, 5 ways to well-being. Making space for your own well-being and mental health, yeah. Repair after rupture. I'm not alone, yeah, how important that is to know. Have fun, yeah. Trying to get into a routine. Yeah, we're on the same journey, but everyone goes at a different pace. Go with the flow. Yeah. Repair. Yeah, regulate yourself first. Okay, structure actually might help reduce the blow-ups, yeah. Yeah, looking ahead to the future and what you can do to help with that. Yeah, the brain, the image of the house of the brain. Toilet roll challenge. We haven't talked enough about fun activities that you can do as a family. You know, great to hear that. Be kind to myself, yeah. Thank you. And do keep adding to those as you've got, as you have thoughts and ideas. You know, it's important for us to go away from things and really think, actually, how is this useful for us? And it's really helpful for Tamara and I and my team, because it helps us to know what things we're talking about that are useful and helpful for you. So thanks so much for your feedback. And thank you. It's okay to have bad days, absolutely. You know, and tomorrow is another day. Absolutely, you can start it afresh. I'm just going to move us on to the second Slido. And there's just basic feedback on has the session been helpful that we'd really appreciate just getting from you, please. So I'm really sorry that we've gone over. It was clearly too much that we want to share in these sessions, and we'll work really hard to reduce them down to the hour that we had committed to. Thanks so much for your feedback on that. That's really helpful.